part, just like this, I'll be mentioning a little bit about processing, which is very similar to what design technology doing, but just on the service. And the third part, just two slides. When I was doing this presentation, I always like to show local scientists what their science has been doing, how well they've been doing in a global perspective, which is two slides showing some information. And lastly, I'll be showing you a few slides on how to prepare manuscript before you prepare for submission. So first part, information. So what is Nature Communications? We are a multidisciplinary journal publishing in high-quality sciences in the beginning by just focusing about physics and chemical, but now we are about invading into earth science, social science, and chemical science. So if you ask me what is the scope of Nature Communication, there's no scope, anything goes. And just we are open access, but actually go open access, meaning that every paper published from 2014 onward, they will be open access rather than immediately their final format. And the default publication license right now is CCB1 and CND, but if you wish, you can also choose to use the CCB1, which has no regulation at all other than PHP. So here's just a slide showing you what are the differences between the CCB1 licenses. Now these are some few metrics. So if you look at this link, it will show you all the metrics of all the major journals, including lots of journals. So it might become complimentary sometimes. But for Nature Communications, what we usually have is that we try to ensure we get the first decision by NA, and then the first post-review decision by 50 days. Right now, the time from submission to accept is about 230 days. You may think that this is a long time. I don't have like 200 time. I don't have about 200 days in my life. But most of the time, this manuscript is reviewed for revision. Not with us, it's doing nothing. So hopefully we'll give you previous for that. The global accept rate for Nature Communications submission is about 17%. Of course, different topic, very different slightly. But if your paper is sent out for peer review, then there's about roughly about 70% chance that it will be eventually accepted. Now, Nature Discrimination, we signed the scientific San Francisco Declaration of Research Assessment. So we mentioned some numbers. I can assure you, I've been working there for almost 10 years. We are good journalists, and then we should try to something to this. Like I said, scope, the Nature Communication, we don't have scope to do everything. But even within my immunology team, again, just like Chris covered, including from, so things like basic immunology, such as immune cell development, animal models of immune pathogen control, or things more applied, such as the vaccine development, immune diseases in human, and recently we've been expanding aggressively into clinical studies, including clinical trials. We also appreciate other type of advances, such as novel immune methods, new animal models, or even some immune sequence papers, which is not really trendy, but still there are some important findings at times. But we are prevented by what I'm going to present, but what would be the hot topics of the broad envelope of immunology that I consider to be popular. So here are a few things that are based on not just my own personal point of view, but based on the assessment from reviewers and our readers. So immune regulation is something that's never going on the trend because it can be applied in so many different aspects. Cancer immunotherapy, I think ever since 2019, that trend has never stopped. Right now, about 40% of our submissions in the team came from cancer-related or even focused on cancer immunotherapy. And systems immunology, I think this goes back to what Chris mentioned, that when you have big data, you can do a lot of things that you normally cannot do before, and this also is that it's quite well assisted by the advanced technologies such as single-cell analysis, starting with transcriptome, but now we're going into proteome and a lot of different spatial and whatnot. And with this, and with the assistance of AI or machine learning, you can really get a lot of data that the human brain cannot process individually. So I think these are the topics that I look forward to see. And again, just like Chris, we can't really charge much. Immunology is really embedded into every aspect. So this is a graph showing you that Nature Communication started in 2012. On that year, we only published 15 papers that's related to immunology, right? And now, okay, we are now at published about 600 papers each year, Nature Communication alone, on immunology. So much so that at one point, I was the only immunology editor, and then now I have to lead a team of 8 editors just to process and have submissions. So I say that I know I'm talking already to a lot of you who are immunologists, so I don't have to encourage you. But if you have not really get into immunological study, now wouldn't be a bad time to go into it. So data processing, you might find this information a little bit redundant from what Chris has introduced you to, but still, it doesn't hurt to confirm that we are both going to go for the same principles. So as an editor, what do I decide? What papers to send out for review and what papers that I need to send back to the authors and tell them you might need to do this or that. So the first factor we consider is novelty. So there's a word to support the conclusion answer you previously reported or you provide an answer to previously unaddressed questions. Novelty will be and is always the most important factor that we consider. Of course, different tier of journal have different bars, but that never goes out as a consideration. But even if something is really new and never been done before, it needs to be relevant. For example, it could be studying a rare event that occurs only 1 in a million, but then would that be necessary to publish on Nature Communication to be shared by all the readers? That's something we have to consider. So we need to check and make sure that funding associated with the critical functions of any given type and other physiological condition in place. And beyond that, we also want to make sure that the step or the events that you report here is really significant, that can be further understanding in journal or even witness the topic. And again, like Chris mentioned, sometimes a story may look okay, in parts, but when you put it together, it doesn't make sense. And that's where we often have to tell the audience, you better make sure that your story is conformed, so conformability. Whether the full manuscript or a convincing logical story is also an important factor we assess when we read a paper as an editor. And last but not least, we know that not all papers need to reach or draw a very important biological conclusions. Because sometimes, particularly in the field of systems immunology, just the ability to gather a large data set and then share all a new method or generate a new mouse model and share with the community, this thing itself is important enough. So we do appreciate that there are different types of papers, and that's why we do appreciate value-added when there's a new data set, a new technology, or new methodology. So these are all things that we consider when we decide whether to send a paper out for review or not. And if we do that, then we try to recruit somewhere between 2 to 4 reviewers for that, and then reviewer implementation can be very time consuming, and that's often the major reason why you haven't heard from us for a while, but please be patient with us. And when you submit, please do try to send in a review exclusion that you reach, because we know that there was always big competitions between researchers, so if you don't want a competitive review your unpublished work, we understand that, and we often are not under that. But please do not exclude all the reviewers that's possible in the topic, because that means that I have to spend 3 or 4 times more time to find a proper review for you, and that wouldn't be to your benefit. And last but not least, we run slightly different from science immunology. We do not have any editorial board members, so every decision was made by me, one handling editor, professional editor, or in-house editor at Nature Communications. The decision often will be concurred by another editor, but the review of comments, even though they constitute a very important part of our decision, is only a supplemental. So it is the editor's job to decide whether this work, the scope, the importance, the advance, is it good enough, is it a fit for Nature Communication or not. So please do understand that it's never a head count. Now, if in case your manuscript is returned to you, then it is your right to appeal the decision, and all you have to do is email your handling editor, and then we will send you the appeal link and some of your files. But we do not need to understand that appeals are not prioritized. So sometimes we will sit on the back burner for a couple of days or even a couple of weeks if the editor is busy handling other type of manuscript or at different stages. And my experience is that nature communication, the pure success rate is quite low. I would say somewhere around the 5%, 10% ballpark. But I'm hoping you will believe that this low successful rate is not because we want to save our face, but instead we do try to make our first initial decision the correct one, so that we don't have to go back again. And there are many journals in the nature or nature portfolio that they do in large papers. So naturally there will be a transfer process, and this transfer process could occur at any stage, the pre-review or post-review, and it always involves the two editors or the two donor and recipient journal talking to each other in some way to decide whether the suitability or scope of text and in what form the transfer can be conducted. But the final decision on how to transfer is always on the authors. So all we do as a donor journal is that we send you a transfer link. This link will take you to our transfer portal, but then from there you can do whatever you want. And when I say whatever you want, you look at the pyramid or the tiers of the nature portfolio. At Guangzhou we have a nature, and then our nature immunology, nature communication right from here. We have communications biology, and the very basic foundation with scientific report. So a normal route is for you to try your luck with nature, it doesn't work with nature immunology, and come to us, and then eventually you can decide whether you want to try communication biology or go straight to scientific report. So this is the more regular route. But like I said, it's all up to you. You can do whatever you want. So you can submit to the communication biology, send back to you, and you say, maybe the editor there is just nice and broad, you guys want to try nature. It could help, it could work, very rarely. I do have one paper that's submitted to me that I did send out the review, and the author then used that transfer link to submit to Nature Medicine, and then send out for review. So, but then eventually the author come back to us because Nature Medicine, when they said the revised decision, they want to ask so many other data. The author said, I don't want to do it, so they never come back with us. Anyway, but then with all these complexities in transfer, you can then ask the question, how do I transfer? Here are things you can consider. Each transfer would take up 5 to 50 days work. So if you are in a hurry and you want to avoid too many transfers, scope of different journals are also slightly different. Like if it's immunology, then it's a clearly more trial nature immunology. But if it's across different journals, then you should consider whether it will be more easy to publish. Is it be easier to publish on Nature Cancer, or is it Nature Medicine, or is it Nature Immunology? Something you have to consider. Time and Nature Immunology are both substitute-based, even though they have some OA or even OA options, but Nature Communication is OA, so that's something you need to consider. And if you're considering OA, then there comes an APC or article positive charge. So financial situation is also something you need to consider. Lastly, we often see that they have very back-to-back publications or co-submissions are often helpful in improving the impact of the papers, of the two papers together. So if you have a collaborator and they are submitting these communications, then it might be useful for you to also submit these communications and then mention these back-to-back processing at the same time. Okay. So 2 slides very quickly on how South Korea has been doing. So this is a number for 2024, covering all topics. This is not just immunology, okay? And the number in blue is the number of submission, and the line chart in red is the percentage of accept on this region. So China is right there, and I don't think you know that. They submitted more than 30,000 papers to us. The accept rate of about somewhere around 10%. And South Korea has been doing really well, even though the volume is less. But you do enjoy a higher accept rate around 15% also. So this is the 2024 snapshot for different regions in Asia. But if you take South Korea and we look at the data chronologically, then you can see that the submission from South Korea to Nature Communication has been growing very steadily, which is a good thing. But more importantly, the accept rate has been climbing also steadily from about 9% all the way to somewhere stabilizing around 15%. So I think not only the volume of the submission volume size increased in South Korea, the quality of size also increased on proportions. So I really want to congratulate you for doing a very good job, and please do continue sending us. And lastly, just a few very quick tips on how to prepare a manuscript. So, kind of, I want to share with you what is the editor's view on what the manuscript should be. In nature communication, we don't do live editing or full live editing like we do at the science and technology. I used to want to do that, but my boss told me that you should spend your time processing all papers. And so I only get to edit the title abstract right now, but still I enjoy it a lot. But even then, I think I still have a good idea of what the paper should be and what component should serve what purpose. So for me, a title should be a concise and precise description of data and conclusions without using much jargon. So basically, you want to condense everything you want to show in one sentence, 15 words or so, and that's not easy to do. But you can start that by writing a good abstract, because abstract is just like a mini paper, where you should provide a microscopic presentation of introduction, result, discussion, everything with some sufficient detail, and then have a clear logical flow, so that whoever reads your abstract knows exactly what to expect in a paper, right? So abstract like a mini paper, you can write a good abstract. All you have to do is take it down, take it a step further, condense it to 15 words, and there you are in a very nice title. Introduction, some people think it's easy, some people think it's boring, but to me, introduction is actually a very important part of the paper, because it provides not just a summary of a historical review, but actually it explains it in such a way that it leads the readers to speculate and predict what they wanted, what question I want to ask. So a good introduction to the introduction is that after reading it, you understand the question and you really want to go in and read the result. So that I encourage you to spend some good time and don't make a laundry list of just listing all the papers that you have read, but instead trying to make it a pillar of a story that is to come. Result, on the other hand, is very simple. I think you should write it as plain as possible, because I think result should serve to supplement but not to replace the figures. So do present your figures well. And discussion is a place where I believe it's a more liberal discussion between the readers and the authors. So often I don't intervene unless my reviewer tells me that this discussion needs to be increased or reduced or whatever. Now, there are other considerations between, in addition to the 5 major components. So figures, like I mentioned, is worth 1,000 words. A best figure, a best collection of figures will already tell the readers what you really want. So make them easy to read, make them large, and make them logical, and present only one idea per figure. Now, methods. I will mention later that the nature portfolio, we really want to advertise reproducibility, and having detailed method is the best way to approach that. So much so that the nature communication do not limit the length of method section. You can write as much as you want, and we encourage it. Statistics, I think no science can be achieved without any statistical methods. So make sure that you're planning well, make sure you have enough sample numbers, data points, and present them all, so that you can really convince your readers that the conclusion you draw is a solid one. Competing issues, with immunology moving toward clinical science, I think a lot of biotech companies are interested in publishing papers, and of course, you will need to, if you are such an author, you will need to declare that you hold stars, you have patent application, whatnot. These things, however, really have no bearing for our editorial decision. We just need the information to be presented transparently there for the readers, so that they can judge the impact of your work based on what they believe. Right? But for editors, we don't really care. We just need the information to be there. And finally, data availability, and this is, again, go back to reproducibility. I think we believe that open research and sharing data is trend now, and it also help reduce redundancy and waste of scientific money. So we do ask you to be very transparent and compassionate in this aspect. Now, like I mentioned, we recently tried to push for a lot of clinical researchers, so I think it might be worthwhile to mention a few things. So if your paper describes a phase 1, phase 2 trial, then we often will send it out for review, but we do kind of want the data to be of some importance and some advances where it's not just totally confirmative or repetitive, for a couple of trials that have been published. But if it comes to phase 3 or phase 4 trial, then at nature communication, we pretty much always say no review. Because we believe that if it's so important needing a phase 3 trial, then it's likely worthwhile for the reader. So we will at least send out a review and then wait for reviewer outputs. But on the other hand, if it's an observational trial or it is just an exploratory or analysis of a proceeding trial, then having some biological importance will be useful and will be an important factor for us to decide the OTR or the peer review process. Now, if you are preparing such a clinical manuscript, then please make sure that first you follow all the reporting guidance, such as if it's a randomized clinical trial, you want to do a consult, if it's a biomarker for cancer, you want to follow remark, etc. And then make sure that all the ethic and other information that has been publicly described in the method. And then finally, when you submit clinical trial, we ask you to also submit your approved site protocol, and we'll want you to include the trial registration in your abstract and method, so that we can verify the information and make sure that there is no issues on clinical reporting. Now, just very quickly, 2 slides. Regardless of whether you're doing your study involving human or involving animal, you should always apply for the proper protocol and follow a protocol to conduct your research. If it's human material or human donor or participant, you want to make sure you remove all the patient identifier before you publish the data. And if it's animal, you want to follow the 3R principles for reduction, replacement, and refinement for the welfare of the animal. Now, my last slide. So we value research integrity a lot, and we know that there has been an ongoing crisis on validity or integrity of scientific publishing. So I believe that we are all part of this community. We should all try to help it. And for this, the minimum we can do is that we need to make sure that there is reproducibility in your sites. Okay? So to do that, like I said, we ask that all the authors describe the methods of including procedures and reagents as much as possible. For certain type of data, we mandate them to be deposited on a public repository so that it is shared and scrutinized and validated. And lastly, we urge that you ensure that your data has been independently repeated multiple times, preferably by different people in the lab, so that we know that they are reproducible. And when it comes to validity, please, when you write your paper, please state or conclude only what the data support. But when you do so, please present all data whether they are supporting or not. So don't just take out data 1 or 2 just because they don't fit with your hypothesis. And we do want you to recognize that all conducts will be reviewed, which is made on our data. And then we encourage you to be as a PI to actually stay postdoc and students so that they show them what is done, what is the best for the scientific community. So that would be the end of my presentation. Thank you for the attention. Over, I'm not going to over too fast.